I'm suspending you until you accept the open marriage with my lover. My wife, the CEO, tried to replace me. The next morning she smiled smugly, until the company lawyer walked in pale, and her smile vanished instantly. I'm going to tell you about the day my wife smiled at me as if I were nothing, and how that smile cost her everything she had spent 15 years building. But we need to start 3 weeks earlier in her corner office on the 47th floor, where the Seattle skyline stretched out behind her like a kingdom she had conquered, which in many ways she had. Sarah Chun, Forbes 40 Under 40 CEO, the woman whose face had graced the cover of Business Insider with the headline, "The Architect of Modern Supply Chain Innovation," was my wife. For 12 years, she had been my wife, and for 8 of those years I had been her strategic operations director, the person who turned her brilliant and messy visions into executable reality. We met in graduate school. She was getting her MBA at Wharton. I was finishing my master's in operations management. She had this way of talking about business as if it were poetry, as if supply chains were symphony orchestras and she was the conductor. I fell in love with her mind first, then her drive, and then the way she laughed at 2 in the morning over spreadsheets and cold pizza. We built ChunLogic together. Well, that's not entirely accurate. She built ChunLogic. I built the systems that made ChunLogic work. There's a difference, and I understood that difference from day one. Sarah was the vision, I was the execution. She was the lightning. I was the lightning rod that channeled it into something that wouldn't burn the whole house down. It worked. God, it worked very well. By the 5th year, we had 200 employees. By the 8th year, we had gone public. By the 10th year, we were worth millions of dollars. And Sarah was giving TED Talks about the future of sustainable logistics. I was proud of her. I was proud of us. I was proud of what we built. Past tense. Note that. The office she called me to that Thursday afternoon was all glass and steel and minimalist elegance, all white and chrome and carefully curated. There was a painting on the wall, an abstract piece that cost more than most people's houses, and it was the only splash of color in the room. Red and black slashes on a white canvas, anger, emptiness, and gaps. I should have paid more attention to that painting. "Close the door," she said when I entered. "No, hello, honey. No, thanks for coming up." Just close the door with that voice she used with suppliers who had missed their delivery windows. I closed it. I stood in front of her desk like an employee called in for review, which I guess was what I was. She didn't look up from her laptop for a full 30 seconds. It's a power play I had seen her use 100 times. Make them wait. Make them understand who controls the pace of the conversation. I had seen her do it with board members and with investors, and once memorably with a senator who thought he could intimidate her into accepting unfavorable contract terms. I had never been on the receiving end of it. "We need to talk about our marriage," she said finally without looking at me yet. The Seattle skyline behind her was gray. It was always gray in November. Rain streaked the windows, and the clouds hung low enough for the Space Needle to disappear into them like an unfinished thought. "Okay," I said. "I'm not happy," she continued. And now she did look up, her dark eyes meeting mine with something that looked almost like pity. "I haven't been happy for a while. Here's the thing about being married to someone for 12 years. You know their rhythms. You know when they're building something up. You know when they've rehearsed the conversation in their head, probably in the shower or during their morning run, probably more than once. This was rehearsed. I'm listening," I said, "because what else do you say?" "I think we've grown apart," she said. "You're so focused on the operational side of things, on the details. And I'm focused on the big picture, the strategy, the vision. We're not partners anymore. We're just coworkers." The rain was falling harder. I could hear it against the windows now. That soft percussion that was the soundtrack to every winter in Seattle. "We're more than coworkers," I said quietly. "Are we?" She leaned back in her chair, and I saw it, then the slight smile playing on the corner of her mouth, the one she got when she was about to win a negotiation. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about resource allocation or quarterly projections? She was right. A painfully accurate point. "So what are you saying?" I asked, although a part of me already knew. A part of me had known for months, maybe longer, and had been carefully avoiding knowing it, pushing it into that mental drawer where you keep truths too uncomfortable to examine. "I'm saying I want to open our marriage." The words hung in the air between us, as clear and cold as the glass that separated us from a 47-story drop. "Open it." I repeated as if maybe I had misunderstood, although I hadn't. "I met someone," she said, and there was that smile again. Wider now. His name is Marcus Ree. He's a partner at Goldman. We met at the Singapore conference last month. Singapore. She had been gone for a week. I had managed the entire Pacific Rim Client Summit in her absence, had pulled off a deal that saved us $12 million in shipping costs, and she had sent me exactly 3 text messages the entire time. Are you having an affair? I said. It's not an affair if I'm being honest about it, she corrected. That's why I'm talking to you. I don't want to lie. I don't want to sneak around. I want us to evolve into a more modern arrangement. Modern arrangement, as if we were upgrading our phone plan. And what do I get in this modern arrangement? I asked. Freedom. She said simply the same freedom I have. You can see other people too if you want. No judgment, no jealousy. We're both adults. I stood there in her corner office, the space we had celebrated in when we first leased it, where we had christened her CEO desk in a moment of inappropriate office behavior, and I realized something profound. She thought I would say no. She was counting on me to say no. This whole conversation was theater. She wanted the moral high ground. She wanted to be able to say she had tried, that she had been honest, that she had offered me the same freedom she was taking, and that I had been the rigid one, the traditional one, the one unwilling to compromise. Then she could leave with a clear conscience. Then she could tell the board, the investors and her friends at expensive restaurants that the marriage had simply run its course, that we had grown apart, that these things happen. I had seen her negotiate enough deals to recognize the staging. I need to think about it, I said. That's fair, she replied, and I caught the flicker of surprise in her eyes. She had expected me to explode, to shout, to make a scene. Take the time you need. I turned to leave. Derek, she called. I stopped at the door. I love you. You know that, right? This isn't about love. It's about being realistic about what we've become. I nodded without turning around, because if I had turned around, she would have seen my face, and I wasn't ready for her to see my face yet. The elevator ride to my office on the 38th floor took 45 seconds. I counted each one, watching the numbers descend on the digital display above the doors. 47, 46, 45. Each number was a step away from her altitude, from her stratosphere. My office was smaller, no corner views, no abstract art, just a functional space with 2 monitors, a decent chair, and a whiteboard covered in network diagrams and optimization algorithms. I never cared about the view. I cared about the work. I sat at my desk and opened a folder I had created 3 months ago, the one I hoped I would never need to open, but I had known. A part of me had known since Singapore, since before Singapore, since the night she came home from a board meeting and her phone lit up with a text message while she was in the shower, and I had seen the name Marcus and a single heart emoji. I hadn't snooped. I hadn't checked her messages. I hadn't done anything except notice and file that notification away in the same mental drawer where I had been filing a lot of things lately. But I had started documenting. The folder on my screen was titled Insurance, and it contained 9 months of carefully compiled data, not personal emails. I had never violated her privacy in that way, but corporate communications, board meeting minutes, financial reports, everything that crossed my desk in my role as strategic operations director, including some things that probably shouldn't have crossed my desk. Shine Logic had grown fast, too fast, maybe. And when you grow that fast, sometimes corners are cut. Regulations are creatively interpreted. Sarah called it aggressive optimization. The lawyers called it pushing the boundaries within legal frameworks. I called it what it was: securities fraud, environmental regulation violations, and labor law breaches that would make the Department of Labor very interested in having a conversation. None of it was massive. None of it was Enron-level criminality. But it was enough. Death by 1,000 cuts. And I had documentation of every one of those cuts. I had spent 3 months compiling it, organizing it, creating a clear narrative that any regulatory agency or journalist could follow. I had done it quietly during lunch hours and late nights, always careful to only access information I had legitimate authorization for. I wasn't stealing anything. I was just organizing what I already knew, and I had done it as insurance, hoping I would never need it. The same way you buy a fire extinguisher hoping your house never catches fire. Now my house was burning down. I opened my email and started typing to Board of Directors, Chin Logic Corporation. CC General Counsel. Subject: notification of resignation. I paused there, my fingers hovering over the keys. Once I sent this, there would be no going back. Once I sent this, everything would change. But everything had already changed. I had just been the last to admit it. Dear members of the board, effective immediately, I resign from my position as Strategic Operations Director at ChinLogic Corporation. This decision is made after considerable reflection on both my professional role and my personal circumstances. Professional, keep it professional, don't give them ammunition. I have prepared comprehensive transition documentation for my replacement. All current projects are documented with clear next steps, timeline requirements, and potential risks. This documentation has been uploaded to the shared drive under Operations Transition 2024 Minute. I want to be clear that this resignation is voluntary and immediate. I will not be serving a notice period. I will not be available for consultations or transition meetings. All questions should be directed to my documentation. I have also prepared a comprehensive review of certain operational practices and regulatory compliance concerns that I feel obligated to bring to your attention. This review is attached to this email and includes supporting documentation. That was the key phrase, the one that would make the lawyer's blood pressure spike, the one that would make Sarah understand exactly what I had done. It is my sincere hope that these concerns can be addressed internally. However, if any regulatory agency or journalist contacts me in the future, I will have no choice but to provide them with the same comprehensive documentation in the interest of legal compliance and truthfulness. There was the polite, professional threat. Not blackmail, never blackmail, just a clear statement of intent. If they left me alone, I would leave them alone. If they came after me, I had insurance. It has been an honor to contribute to the growth of ChinLogic. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Derek Shin, Strategic Operations Director. X. I attached the documentation. 67 pages of meticulously organized evidence. Every email, every meeting minute, every financial report that showed the pattern. I had structured it like one of our operational reviews. Clear executive summary, detailed findings, supporting appendices. If you knew how to read it, you would see the whole story. The board would know how to read it. My finger hovered over the send button. Sarah thought she knew me. She thought she knew what I would do. She thought I was the careful, measured one, who would never make waves, who would accept whatever arrangement she proposed, because I was too conflict-averse, too passive, too practical to burn it all down. She had mistaken patience for weakness, had mistaken careful planning for inability to act, had mistaken the fact that I built systems and managed operations with an inability to dismantle those same systems when necessary. I clicked send. The email disappeared from my outbox. Somewhere on the 47th floor, in the inboxes of 7 board members and our very expensive general counsel, an email was arriving that would detonate like a carefully placed explosive. Then I started packing my desk. It didn't take long. I was never one for personal items. A picture of Sarah and me at our wedding that went in the trash. A coffee mug that said "World's okayest COO." In the trash. A little Zen garden someone had given me as a joke. In the trash. What I kept, my laptop, personal property, my notebook full of non-work-related ideas, and a USB drive containing copies of everything I had just sent to the board, encrypted with military-grade security. The rain was still falling. I stood at my window looking out at the gray city and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief, freedom. The real kind, not the kind Sarah had offered me as a consolation prize. My phone vibrated. Text message from Sarah. Can you come back up? We should finish our conversation. I looked at the message for a long moment, then turned my phone off. The next morning, she would come to work expecting me to either agree to her proposal or push back against it. She would have her arguments ready. She would have thought through all the likely responses, all the possible negotiations. She would find an empty desk. She would find a resignation letter. And then this was the part one was looking forward to. She would find out that I had sent comprehensive documentation of every legally questionable decision she had made in the last 2 years to the entire board of directors and the general counsel. She would finally understand that I had been paying attention all along, that I had seen it all, that I had documented it all, and that the quiet, competent COO she had taken for granted had just executed the most perfect strategic play of his career. I walked out of my office. Leaving the door open behind me, I took the elevator to the parking garage, got in my car, and drove home, to the house we bought together, the one with the view of the Sound, the one we renovated with exposed beams and a chef's kitchen. That night I packed 2 suitcases, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the USB drive. Everything else could be sorted out later through lawyers. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a note that said simply, "You wanted an open marriage. Consider this the widest possible opening." Then I drove to a hotel downtown, one with a view of the water. I ordered room service and turned on my phone, just long enough to see 17 missed calls from Sarah and 3 from the general counsel. I turned it off again and slept better than I had slept in months. Tomorrow the Real show would begin. Tomorrow Sarah would learn the difference between the lightning and the lightning rod. Tomorrow she would understand that I wasn't just the person who made her vision functional. I was the person who had been holding the entire structure together, and I had just let go. I woke up at 6:47 a.m. in a hotel room that cost $400 a night, which felt absurdly expensive and somehow appropriate. The Seattle skyline was visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. The city washed clean by the previous night's rain, all crisp and clear in the morning light. My phone was still off. I left it that way. Instead, I ordered coffee from room service and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. Somewhere in our house in Queen and Sarah was probably getting up, reaching for her phone, checking her messages, starting her morning routine. She ran 5 miles every morning, rain or shine, then a protein shake. Then she would check her emails while her hair dried, prioritizing her day, making lists, being the efficient, brilliant so everyone admired. I wondered what time she had realized I hadn't come home. I wondered if she had noticed. The coffee arrived at 7:15, strong and black, the way I always took it. The room service attendant was a young guy, maybe 25, and he had that polite Seattle earnestness as he set up the coffee on the small table by the window. "Beautiful morning," he said. "It is," I agreed. He left, and I sat there with my coffee, thinking about the fact that I had just destroyed my career, my marriage, and possibly my wife's company in the span of a single email. It should have felt worse. It should have felt catastrophic. Instead, it felt like putting down a weight I had been carrying for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Sarah would be getting to the office around 8:30. That was her routine, early enough to beat most of the staff, late enough to have had time for her run and her strategic thinking. She liked to arrive when the building was still quiet, when she could ride the elevator up to 47 in solitude and step into her domain before the chaos of the day began. I pictured her in the elevator at that moment, probably checking her phone, probably irritated that I hadn't responded to any of her messages, probably composing the lecture she would give me about being passive-aggressive, about how we needed to communicate like adults. She would expect me to be at my desk when she arrived, or at least in the building somewhere. Maybe she would think I was avoiding her. Maybe she would think I was sulking. She wouldn't think I was gone. At 8:47, my phone vibrated. Even though it was off, it wasn't a call, just the vibration of the power button being pressed, the screen lighting up with the time and date, and nothing else. I turned it on immediately. It began to vibrate, the messages flooding in calls, voicemails. The notification sounds were like a machine gun, rapid fire, digital chaos. 73 missed calls, 46 text messages, 12 voicemails, all since midnight. I checked the messages first. Most were from Sarah. "Where are you, Derek? This isn't funny. We need to talk about this rationally. You can't just disappear. I know you're upset, but this is childish. Call me." Then they changed tone around 2 a.m. "Derek, I'm worried. Please just let me know you're okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have sprung this on you like that. Can we please talk? The board got your email. What the hell did you send them?" There it was. 2:37 a.m. The moment she had found out. The messages after that were different. "You need to retract that email immediately. Derek, you don't understand what you've done. Call me now. This is going to destroy everything we built." Notice the pronouns. We built when she was scared, when she needed me. The voicemails were worse. I listened to the first one from 11:47 p.m. "Derek, it's me. Look, I know you're upset about our conversation. I get it. It was a lot to process, but you can't just turn off your phone and disappear. We're adults. We're partners. Call me back." Still composed, still in control, still Sarah, the CEO managing a situation. The one from 3:15 a.m. was different. "Derek." Her voice cracked. Real, raw, unfiltered emotion. "What did you send the board?" "Richard just called me. He said you documented everything, every decision, every risk we took. Derek, you're going to destroy the company. You're going to destroy everything we worked for. Please, Please, call me back. We always when things were falling apart. I when things were successful. I deleted the voicemails without listening to the rest. There were also messages from Richard Joy, our board chairman, a venture capitalist who had been our first major investor, who had believed in Sarah's vision when everyone else thought supply chain logistics was too boring to revolutionize. Derek, we need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this. This is serious. We need to discuss your allegations before this goes any further. I'm asking you as someone who has known you for 8 years. Give us a chance to respond to your concerns internally. Translation. Please don't go to the SEC. Please don't go to the press. Please let us handle this quietly. I opened my laptop instead and checked the news. Nothing yet. It was too early. The story hadn't broken, but it would. Because the beautiful thing about sending documentation to a board of directors is that boards talk. They have to talk. 7 people can't keep a secret, especially when that secret threatens a multi-million-dollar valuation. Someone would leak to their lawyer, to their spouse, to a journalist they had drinks with on Friday nights. It was inevitable. I had given them the information. I had lit the fuse. Now I just had to wait for the explosion. At 9:03 my phone rang. Not Sarah, not Richard. A number I didn't recognize, but with a Seattle area code. I answered, Mr. Chun. A woman's voice, professional, carefully neutral. Speaking. This is Jennifer Kohler from the Pacific Northwest Regional Office of the Department of Labor. I'm calling about certain documentation that was forwarded to our office this morning regarding ChinLogic Corporation. I sat up straighter. That was fast. We take workplace safety and labor law violations very seriously. Mr. Chun, I'd like to schedule a time for you to come in and discuss these allegations in detail. Someone on the board had already forwarded my email to the DOL in less than 12 hours, which meant someone on the board was either very ethical or very scared or both. I'm available at your convenience, I said. How about tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I'll be there. She gave me the address, thanked me for my cooperation, and hung up. I sat there with my cooling coffee and my phone in my hand and realized I had just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The Department of Labor was involved now, which meant this would not be handled quietly, which meant Sarah's carefully constructed empire was about to face its first real audit. My phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, Richard. Voicemail. Then a new number. I answered out of curiosity. Derek Chun, a man's voice this time younger, energetic. Yes, my name is Tyler Brox. I'm a reporter with the Seattle Times. I understand you recently resigned from ChinLogic Corporation and made some serious allegations about corporate practices. Would you be willing to comment? So it had already leaked to the press faster than I expected. No comment, I said, Mr. Chun. If there are legitimate concerns about how ChinLogic operates, the public has a right to know. You are in a position to, I said no comment. If you want information, file a FOIA request with the Department of Labor in a few weeks. I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. I turned it off, but not before I saw one more text message from Sarah. I'm coming to find you. Tell me where you are. No threats, no anger, just desperation. I packed my laptop, checked out of the hotel using the in-room tablet, and went down to the lobby. The morning rush hour was in full swing now, business travelers checking out, going to meetings, living their orderly lives. I felt like I was watching it all from behind glass. My car was in the parking garage. I drove north. With no particular destination in mind, just away from downtown, away from the office building where Sarah was probably standing in front of my empty desk at that very moment. Probably with Richard and the lawyers, probably trying to figure out how to contain this. I ended up at Discovery Park, at the overlook where you can see across the Sound to the Olympics. The mountains were sharp and white against the blue sky. Every detail visible in the clean, rain-washed air. This is where Sarah and I had come after we signed our series of funding. 8 years ago, we stood right here, and she kissed me and said, "We're going to change the world." And I had believed her. God, I had believed her completely. I sat on a bench and turned on my phone, just long enough to check one thing. The stock price of ChinLogic. It had opened at 9:30 and was already down 7%. Someone was selling. Someone had heard something. The whispers had started. By noon, it would be a stampede. My phone rang. Sarah again. This time I answered. "Where are you?" She said immediately. No greeting, no preamble. "Does it matter? Derek, please, just come to the office. We need to talk about this face to face. We talked face to face yesterday." I said, In your office, remember? That was different. I didn't know you were going to. She stopped herself, breathing hard. I didn't know you'd been documenting everything. I didn't know you were building a case against me, against the company I corrected, against practices that violated federal law. Not against you personally. It's my company, Derek. It's the same thing. There it was. Not our company. My company. Yes, I said quietly. I guess it is. The lawyers are here, she continued, and I could hear the control coming back into her voice. The CEO managing a crisis. They want to know what it would take for you to retract your allegations, to say you were mistaken, that you misunderstood. I wasn't mistaken, Sarah. I documented everything. Every meeting where we discussed misclassifying workers to avoid benefits. Every email where we talked about creative interpretations of environmental regulations. Every financial report that stretched the definition of revenue recognition to meet our quarterly targets. Silence on the other end. You knew. I continued. You knew all of it, and you did it anyway because you were so focused on growth, on valuation, on being the next unicorn success story that you stopped caring about the rules. That's not fair, she said. And there was real hurt in her voice now. We were trying to build something, trying to compete. Do you know how hard it is for a female CEO to get funding? To be taken seriously, I had to be aggressive. I had to push the boundaries. There's a difference between pushing boundaries and breaking laws. Who are you to judge me? And now the hurt was turning to anger. You were there for all of it. You executed half of those decisions. You're just as complicit as I am. I know, I said. That's why I'm cooperating with the Department of Labor. I'm not claiming to be innocent. I'm claiming to be done. Another, longer silence. This time Marcus has nothing to do with this. She said finally, quietly. Oh, he does. No, I admitted. This isn't about Marcus. It's about you looking at me yesterday and offering me freedom as if it were a gift, as if you were being generous. When what you were really doing was asking me to agree to be devalued, to agree to be less important than your career, your ambitions, your new relationship. That's not. You suspended me. I said. The words came out harder than I intended. You didn't actually say it, but that's what you meant. Take the time you need to get on board with this arrangement. Or else figure out how to be okay with this, or there will be consequences. I never said that. You didn't have to. I heard it. I could hear voices in the background. Someone asking her a question. The lawyers probably wanting to know what I was saying, if I could be reasoned with, if this could still be contained. What do you want? Sarah asked, and her voice was very small. Now, just tell me what you want, and we can work this out. What did I want? I wanted to rewind 8 years to the day we stood at Discovery Park and felt like we were unstoppable. I wanted the version of Sarah who laughed at 2 a.m. over cold pizza. I wanted the partnership we had before the company got too big, before the money got too serious, before success became something sharp and cutting. But you can't rewind. You can only move forward. I want you to fix the company, I said. Reclassify the workers correctly. Comply with the environmental regulations. Restate the financials accurately. Make it right, Sarah. Make it the way we should have done it from the beginning. That will tank our valuation. Yes, I agreed. It will. The board will never approve it. The investors will revolt. Then I guess you'll have to decide what's more important, your valuation or your freedom. That's not fair, she said again. But there was no force behind it now. You're right, I said. It isn't, but it's real. I hung up. The mountains across the sound were so clear in the morning light, sharp and white and permanent. They had been there long before Chin Logic existed, and they would be there long after it was gone. That perspective helped. I turned off my phone again, got in my car, and drove to the airport. It was time to disappear for a while, time to let the truth do its work. I bought a one-way ticket to San Diego on my personal credit card, not because I had any particular attachment to San Diego, but because it was warm there and Seattle had started to feel like a cage made of gray sky, cold rain and memories I no longer wanted. The flight didn't leave until 2 p.m., which gave me 4 hours to sit in the airport and watch my old life implode from a safe distance. I turned my phone back on at 11:30 a.m., sitting in a corner of the Alaska Airlines lounge with a mediocre sandwich and a beer I didn't really want. The notifications came flooding in again, but this time I was ready for them. By then, the Seattle Times had published its story at 10:47 a.m. ChinLogic CEO faces internal allegations of regulatory violations. It was carefully worded, full of phrases like according to sources and alleged concerns, and no official comment. But the story was out there now. Tyler Brox had done his job. Someone on the board, my money was on Richard trying to get ahead of it, had leaked just enough to make it news without making it catastrophic. Still, the stock was down 14%. Now trading had been halted twice for volatility. The message boards were on fire with speculation, retail investors panicking, institutional investors making quiet, careful exits. I opened the Chin Logic internal Slack, which I still had access to because no one had thought to revoke my credentials yet. The company channels were chaos. From General, at 9:15 a.m., does anyone know what's going on? Derek's desk is empty, and there are lawyers everywhere. I heard he resigned. I heard he was fired. I heard he sent some kind of bombshell email to the board. From leadership at 9:47 a.m., all hands meeting at 2 p.m., attendance mandatory. Sarah will address recent departures and media reports. I wondered what Sarah would say, how she would spin it. She was good at spinning things. She had convinced venture capitalists to invest in a supply chain company when everyone said the market was too boring. She had convinced Fortune 500 companies to trust their logistics to a startup. She had convinced an entire industry that she was the future. She could probably convince her employees that I was the villain here. My phone rang, not Sarah this time. A number I recognized. David Park, my closest friend at the company. We started the same week when Chin Logic was 15 people in a rented office space above a restaurant. I answered. "You magnificent bastard," he said without preamble. I couldn't help it. I laughed. "That's not what I was expecting you to say." "What were you expecting?" "That I'd be mad." "Derek, I've been watching this company cut corners for 2 years. I've been watching you get quieter and quieter in meetings, more distant. I knew something was brewing. I just didn't know you had the balls to do something about it." "I'm not sure balls is the right word," I said. "More like desperation." "Sarah is losing her mind," he continued. "She called an emergency executive meeting at 8 this morning, showed up looking like she hadn't slept, which for her is practically unheard of. The lawyers were already there. They've been in the conference room ever since. What are they saying officially? Nothing. Unofficially, they're trying to figure out if they can make this go away. But Derek, the DOL called, the SEC called. Apparently, there's a Bloomberg reporter camped out in the lobby since 9:30. Bloomberg, that was faster than I expected. Someone had made a very calculated leak. How bad is it? I asked. For the company. Bad. We're looking at audits, investigations, probably fines. Some of the contracts Sarah signed might be voidable if we were misrepresenting our compliance status. He paused. For Sarah personally, potentially worse. The board is already talking about whether she needs to step down temporarily while this gets sorted out. Step down. Sarah Chin stepping down from the company she built, the company that was her identity, her purpose, her proof that she had made it. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. "And you?" David asked. "Where are you?" "Airport," I said, "leaving town for a while." "Smart. Let the lawyers and the regulators fight it out while you're somewhere with a beach and expensive drinks." Something like that. "For the record," he said, and his voice got serious. "You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know you just blew up your marriage and probably your career, but those labor violations, the environmental stuff, we were going to get caught eventually. You just controlled the narrative before someone else did. That's what I keep telling myself." I said, "Did it help?" "Not really," he laughed. "Yeah, probably won't for a while. But Derek, when this is all over, when the dust settles, you'll be the guy who had integrity. That's worth something." We said our goodbyes and I sat there with my beer and my sandwich and my phone and opened my personal email. 3 new messages had arrived while I was talking to David. The first was from a headhunter. "I represent several firms interested in speaking with you about executive operations roles. Your experience at Chin Logic would be highly valued. Please let me know if you're open to exploratory conversations." That was fast. The vultures could smell blood in the water and were already circling trying to figure out if I was a liability or an asset. The second was from Richard Joy, sent to my personal email instead of my work one. "Derek, I need you to understand something. The board is grateful, genuinely grateful that you brought these concerns to our attention internally. First, you could have gone straight to the regulators, straight to the press. You gave us the chance to respond, but you have put us in an impossible position. If we don't act on your documentation, we're complicit. If we do act, we're admitting to violations that could cost us hundreds of millions in fines and settlements. Sarah is talking about fighting this, about hiring a PR firm, about an aggressive legal defense, about discrediting your documentation as the act of a disgruntled employee going through a divorce. I am telling you this because I have known you for 8 years and I believe you are a good person who found himself in a bad situation. I am asking you to think very carefully about your next steps. This can still be resolved with minimal damage to everyone involved. Please, call me Richard. I read it twice. It was a good email, sympathetic, reasonable, acknowledging my position, while also making it clear that I was causing trouble for people who trusted me. It was also a negotiation tactic. Make me feel guilty, make me feel responsible for the damage, make me the one who had to compromise. I deleted it. The third email was from an address I didn't recognize. Marcus Williams. Mr. Chun, you don't know me, but I worked at Chin Logic for 3 years as a warehouse supervisor before I was fired last year. I was fired after raising concerns about safety violations and worker misclassification. I saw the news this morning. I want you to know there are at least 20 of us, former employees, who were pushed out for asking questions or refusing to follow policies we knew were wrong. If you need witnesses, if you need additional documentation, if you need people willing to speak on the record, we are here. Thank you for doing what we couldn't. Marcus Williams. I stared at that email for a long time. 20 people. 20 people who tried to do the right thing and lost their jobs for it. 20 people who were silenced while I stayed silent. Also staying comfortable in my director's salary and my marriage to the CEO. I told myself I was documenting things for insurance, for protection, for leverage, but really I had just been waiting for the pain to become personal enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Sarah offering me an open marriage wasn't the cause. It was just the final weight on a scale that had been tipping for a long time. I wrote back to Marcus Williams. Marcus, thank you for reaching out. I am meeting with the Department of Labor tomorrow at 10 a.m. Would you be willing to speak with them as well? If so, please contact Jennifer Kohler at this number. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner, Derek. Then I closed my laptop and tried to eat my sandwich, but it tasted like cardboard and regret. At 1:30 p.m., my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The all-hands meeting is in 30 minutes, she said. No greeting. Her voice was hoarse, strained. I'm going to tell them you had a mental health crisis, that you were under enormous stress and made allegations that don't hold up under scrutiny. That's a lie, I said calmly. It's a necessary fiction, she corrected. The alternative is admitting everything you documented is true, which would be corporate suicide. It is true, Sarah. I documented everything. You already know that. Derek, please. And now her voice cracked again, that raw emotion coming through. I'm begging you. Retract the documentation. Say you were overwhelmed, that you misinterpreted things. I will end it with Marcus. We can go to couples therapy, we can fix this. You can't offer to fix our marriage as a bribe to save your company. I said, I'm not bribing you. I'm trying to save what we built together. No, I said quietly. You're trying to save what you built. I was just the person who made it work. That's not true. It is. And you know it. That's why you were willing to open our marriage, because you saw me as infrastructure, as a utility, as something you needed but didn't particularly value. Silence on the other end, long enough that I thought she might have hung up. I loved you past tense. I know. I loved you too. But love isn't enough. When one person treats the other like an employee, they can suspend until they comply. I never said I was suspending you. You didn't have to. I heard voices in the background again. Someone telling her it was time. The all-hands meeting was starting. She needed to go perform. I have to go, she said. I know, Derek. I said, don't ask me again. The answer is no. I am not retracting anything. I am not lying for you. I am not protecting you from the consequences of your choices. This is going to destroy me, she said. And it wasn't a threat, it was just a fact. Stated plainly. No, I corrected. Your choices destroyed you. I'm just the person who stopped pretending they hadn't. She hung up. Then I turned off my phone again and sat on the balcony until 3 a.m., watching the ocean and trying to process the fact that I was going to be a father, that Sarah was going to be a mother, that we were going to be connected forever, even if we weren't together, that I had just made everything infinitely more complicated. The waves kept coming, steady, relentless, indifferent to human drama. They had been coming for millions of years, and they would keep coming for millions more. And my problems were just noise against their rhythm. Somehow that helped. I didn't sleep that night, just sat on the balcony watching the ocean change from black to gray to blue as the sun came up over the Pacific. sometime around 5 a.m. I ordered room service coffee and tried to brace myself for what was coming. The Department of Labor meeting was at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which meant I needed to catch a 7:30 flight back to Seattle, which meant I would spend less than 24 hours in San Diego, in this borrowed piece before I plunged back into the wreckage. I packed my bag, checked out, drove to the airport in the pre-dawn darkness. The terminal was quiet, just early morning business travelers and red-eye survivors shuffling to their gates with dead eyes and carry-on luggage. I felt like I belonged with them, the walking dead, people going through the motions. On the flight back, I turned on my phone just long enough to check the news. ChinLogic stock had been delisted. The SEC had opened a formal investigation. The Seattle Times had published a follow-up story with quotes from 3 former employees, including Marcus Williams, describing a pattern of whistleblower retaliation. And Bloomberg had published a think piece titled The Hidden Costs of Unicorn Culture: How ChinLogic's race to multi-billion valuation led to regulatory collapse. It was happening. The story was taking on its own momentum now, beyond my control, beyond Sarah's control. The truth had mass, and mass has gravity, and gravity pulls everything towards it eventually. I landed in Seattle at 9:17 a.m. I took an Uber directly to the Pacific Northwest Regional Office of the Department of Labor, a brutalist concrete building in the International District that looked exactly like what it was, a federal bureaucracy that didn't care about aesthetics. Jennifer Kohler met me in the lobby at 9:55. She was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that meant business. "Mr. Chun, thank you for coming in. Thank you for taking this seriously," I said. She led me through security, up an elevator, down a hallway lined with workplace safety posters, to a windowless conference room with a long table. There were 3 other people there. 2 men in suits who looked like lawyers, and a woman with a laptop who was clearly there to document everything. "These are Deputy Director Macius and Lead Investigator Rodriguez," Jennifer said, motioning to the men. "And this is Ms. Palmer, who will be recording our conversation." I shook hands all around and sat in a chair that was deliberately uncomfortable. Government furniture designed to keep meetings short. "Before we begin," Jennifer said, "I want to clarify a few things. This is a voluntary interview. You are not under oath, but lying to a federal investigator is a crime. You have the right to have an attorney present. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. "And I don't need an attorney. I'm here to tell you the truth." She nodded and opened a folder that was at least 2 inches thick. My documentation printed out. "We have reviewed the materials you sent to the ChinLogic board," she said. "We have also spoken with several former employees who have corroborated many of your allegations. What we need from you today is context. We need to understand how these practices developed, who knew about them, and whether they were systematic or isolated incidents." "They were systematic," I said, "and everyone in senior leadership knew." Deputy Director Macius leaned forward. "Everyone. Sarah Chun, CEO, Richard Joyagwai, Board Chairman, Michael Torres, CFO, Lisa Nguyen, General Counsel, David Park, VP of Engineering, and me, Strategic Operations Director." I paused. We all knew. We all participated. Some of us were more enthusiastic about it than others, but we all knew. "Walk us through how it started," Jennifer said. So I did. I told them about the series of funding round in 2017, when we were 40 employees and burning through cash faster than we were generating revenue. About the pressure from investors to show growth, to hit metrics, to prove we could scale. I told them about the first time we misclassified warehouse workers as independent contractors instead of employees. How Sarah had framed it as giving workers flexibility and optimizing our cost structure, and how our lawyer at the time had said it was aggressive but defensible. I told them how that first compromise made the second one easier, and the third, and the fourth. "It's like a ratchet," I said. "Each decision moves you one click further from center, and there's no mechanism to move back. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll fix it once you're profitable, once you've raised the next round, once you've gone public, but there's always a reason to wait." "Why didn't you object?" Rodriguez asked. Not accusatory, just curious. I did object. At first I could feel the weight of those early meetings, the ones where I had pushed back. But Sarah is very persuasive. She'd say things like everyone in the industry does this, or we're disrupting an outdated regulatory framework, or we can't compete if we're the only ones following rules that were written for a different era. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her, I corrected, because the alternative was admitting that the company we were building was based on corner-cutting and violations, and I had invested too much my career, my marriage, my identity to admit that. Jennifer made a note. When did you start documenting these practices? About 9 months ago. January of this year. I remembered the exact moment. A board meeting where Sarah had dismissed employee safety concerns as operational friction that would be solved at scale. I realized we weren't going to self-correct, that we were going to keep pushing until something broke. I wanted insurance in case I needed it. Insurance against what? Against being made the scapegoat. I said honestly, I knew that if this ever came to light, Sarah would try to blame operations. She would say she gave high-level directives and trusted me to implement them legally. I needed proof that she had known exactly what we were doing and had explicitly approved it. And she did know every detail. Sarah Chun is brilliant, and she's meticulous. She didn't delegate compliance decisions. She made them herself with full knowledge of the risks. Macius pulled a specific document from the folder. This is an email from CEO Chun to you dated March 15, 2024. Can you explain what it refers to? I looked at the email. It was one I had flagged in my documentation. Derek, the environmental compliance costs for the Portland facility are unacceptable. Find a way to reduce them by at least 40%. I don't care how. Just make it work. That was about wastewater discharge permits. I said, the Portland facility was exceeding allowable pollutant levels. The compliance solution would have cost about $800,000 in new filtration systems. Sarah wanted me to find a cheaper option. What did you do? I found a consultant who specialized in creative compliance solutions. He essentially taught us how to misreport the wastewater discharge levels in a way that was difficult to audit. We'd run clean water through the meters during scheduled inspections and discharge the actual wastewater at night when monitoring was less rigorous. The room was very quiet. You are describing deliberate fraud, Macius said. Yes, I nodded. I am. And you participated in this fraud? Yes, I found the consultant. I approved the payments. I implemented the system. I met his eyes. That's why I'm here. I'm not claiming to be innocent. I'm claiming to be done. Jennifer looked at me for a long moment. Mr. Chun, I want to be clear about something. The testimony you are providing us today could be used in criminal proceedings against Chun Logic, against Sarah Chun, and potentially against you. You could be prosecuted for your role in these violations. Do you understand? I understand, I said again. But 20 people lost their jobs for trying to stop this, for doing the right thing. I kept my job by doing the wrong thing. I need to make that right, even if it costs me. She nodded slowly. Tell us about the whistleblower retaliation. So I did. I told them about Marcus Williams and the others, about how anyone who raised concerns was systematically marginalized and then fired for performance issues that were trumped up after the fact. I told them about the HR director who had pushed back on the independent contractor classification and was fired 3 weeks later. I told them about the safety inspector who documented the OSHA violations and found himself accused of falsifying reports. I told them about the clear, deliberate pattern of silencing dissent through intimidation and termination. Did you participate in those firings? Rodriguez asked. I was in the meetings where they were discussed. I didn't vote against them, which makes me complicit. We went through the documentation page by page, email by email, meeting minute by meeting minute. They asked questions. I answered them. The woman with the laptop typed everything, her fingers steady on the keys, recording the dismantling of a multi-million-dollar company. At some point, someone brought in sandwiches. I didn't eat mine, just drank water and kept talking. At 3:47 p.m., Jennifer finally closed her folder. Mr. Chun, I think we have what we need for now. We will likely have follow-up questions as our investigation proceeds. You should know that we will be interviewing other Chin Logic employees, including current senior management, including Sarah, Mrs. Chun. Yes, I nodded. She's going to deny everything. She's going to say I'm fabricating evidence because I'm angry about the end of our marriage. She's already started that narrative with the company. We are aware of that possibility, Macius said. But you have provided us with documentary evidence that is not dependent on your credibility. Emails, financial records, meeting minutes. These things speak for themselves. There's something else you should know. I said, Sarah told me last night that she's pregnant. 6 weeks, which makes it my child. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Calculation maybe. Consideration of how that fact would complicate everything. That does not change our investigation, she said carefully. But thank you for disclosing it. I stood up. My legs were stiff from sitting for 6 hours straight. What happens now? Now we expand our investigation. We will audit Chin Logic's facilities. We will interview employees. We will review financial records. We will coordinate with the SEC on the accounting matters, and we will refer several matters to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. How long does that take? Months, she said, maybe longer. These things move slowly. But Mr. Chun, I want you to know that what you did today took courage. Not many people are willing to implicate themselves to expose wrongdoing. I didn't have much choice. I said, once I sent that first email, this was inevitable. You had a choice, she corrected. You could have destroyed your documentation and claimed it was all a misunderstanding. You could have accepted a settlement from Chin Logic and signed an NDA. You could have protected yourself instead. You chose this. I walked out of the brutalist Department of Labor building into the gray Seattle late afternoon. The rain had started again, soft and persistent, the kind that soaks through your coat without you realizing it until you're already wet. My phone had 43 new messages. I ignored them all and called an Uber. But instead of going to a hotel, I gave the driver an address in Queen and my house, the one Sarah and I had bought together. I needed to see it one more time. I needed to say goodbye to that version of my life. The Uber dropped me off at 4:35 p.m. Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. She was probably still at the office, probably in crisis meetings, probably trying to save her company from the bomb I detonated. I used my key to let myself in. The house was exactly as I had left it 4 days ago. My coffee cup still in the sink, the book I was reading still on the end table, the wedding photo still on the mantelpiece. The two of us smiling like we'd figured something out that other people hadn't. We looked so young in that photo, so certain. I walked through the room slowly, cataloging memories. The kitchen where we cooked together on Sunday mornings, the living room where we argued about furniture placement, the bedroom where we slept tangled, then separate, then barely touching. The office where I worked late, while Sarah was on the road building systems to support her vision. I sat at my home desk and opened my laptop. There was one more thing I needed to do. I opened my personal email and composed a message to Richard Joyi. Richard, I met with the Department of Labor today and provided 6 hours of testimony. I have told them everything I know about Chin Logic's violations. I have implicated myself, Sarah, and the senior leadership team. I am telling you this as a courtesy, because you were always fair to me, even when you didn't have to be. The federal investigation will be thorough. The SEC will be involved. Possibly the U.S. Attorney's Office. The company as it currently exists cannot survive this. My advice, cooperate fully. Bring in outside compliance experts. Consider a complete restructuring. And for the love of God, don't let Sarah try to fight this. The evidence is overwhelming. I am sorry it has come to this, but it was always going to come to this eventually. Derek, I hit send. Then I packed a bag with more clothes, a few books, and the few personal items that mattered. I took the wedding photo from the mantel and laid it face down on the coffee table and wrote one more note for Sarah. I was at the house. I took a few things. The rest is yours. I met with the DOL today, told them everything. I implicated myself along with everyone else. This isn't revenge, it's accountability. If you are really pregnant, we will have to work out custody arrangements through lawyers. But I can't be your husband anymore. I hope you fix the company. I hope you learn from this. I hope our child grows up knowing that truth matters more than winning. I left the note on the kitchen counter next to the ring I had left days before. Then I walked out of the house and closed the door behind me. It was raining harder now. I stood in the driveway and let it soak me. Let it wash away the last residue of the life I had been living. Tomorrow the news about the DOL investigation would break. Tomorrow Sarah would find my note. Tomorrow everything would get worse before it got better. But tonight I was free. Finally, completely free. I checked into a different hotel, not the expensive downtown one with the view, a mid-range place near the university district, the kind of place where graduate students and visiting professors stayed, where no one cared who you were or what you had done. The room was functional, clean sheets, good Wi-Fi, a window that overlooked a parking lot. It was perfect, anonymous, a place to exist without being perceived. I ordered Thai food from the restaurant next door and sat on the bed eating pad Thai straight from the container, watching the local news on mute. They were still leading with the Chin Logic story, but it was the same footage from yesterday. The exterior of the building, stock price graphics, a photo of Sarah from her Charlotte. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow they would have the DOL investigation to report. They would have federal involvement. They would have a story that went beyond CEO faces allegations to CEO under criminal investigation. My phone rang at 8:37 p.m., David Park. You really did it, he said when I answered. You sat down with the feds and burned the whole thing down. How do you know? Because Richard Joye called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Because our general counsel just hired outside criminal defense lawyers. Because Sarah locked herself in her office at 4 p.m. and hasn't come out. She found my note. I said, what note? I went to the house. I left her a note saying I testified, that I told them everything. David was quiet for a moment. Jesus, Derek, you could have just sent a text. No, I said. I couldn't. This had to be on paper. It had to be real. Well, it's real now. The entire executive team is in panic mode. Michael Torres is talking about pleading the fifth. Lisa Nguyen is claiming she always advised against the violations, but was overruled. Everyone is trying to figure out how to save their own ass. And Sarah isn't talking to anyone. But Derek, there's something you need to know. She sent a company-wide email at 6 p.m. You want to hear what it said? Not really, but tell me anyway. I heard a rustle of paper. Then David reading, Team, I want to directly address the rumors and media speculation. My husband, Derek Shun, is going through a severe personal crisis. He has made allegations about company practices that are not supported by fact. We believe his judgment has been compromised by mental health challenges and the breakdown of our marriage. We are cooperating fully with all regulatory inquiries and are confident that these baseless allegations will be proven false. In the meantime, I ask for your patience and your trust. We have built something extraordinary together, and I will not allow one person's personal vendetta to destroy it. Onward, Sar. I closed my eyes. There it was, the narrative she had promised Derek Chun, the unreliable narrator, the vengeful husband, the man having a breakdown. How did people respond? I asked. Mixed. Some people believe her. Some people are updating their LinkedIn profiles. A lot of people are just confused. He paused. Derek, she's calling you mentally ill. She's putting it in writing to 300 employees. That's defamation. Yeah, I finished. My lawyer is going to love that. You have a lawyer? Not yet, but I'll get one tomorrow. We talked for a few more minutes. David updating me on the office chaos, the rumors spreading, the tribal divisions forming, people taking sides. Team Sarah versus Team Derek. As if we were divorcing parents and the company was our custody battle for the children I supposed we were about to have. After I hung up, I opened Sarah's email on my laptop. It was still in my inbox, auto-forwarded from my old work address to my personal one. I read it 3 times. She was good. I had to give her that. She had positioned herself as the victim, the devoted CEO whose mentally unstable husband was trying to destroy her life's work. She had made it personal instead of procedural. She had made me the villain, and some people would believe her. Maybe a lot of people. But the Department of Labor didn't care about narratives. They cared about emails and financial records and documented patterns. They cared about evidence, and I had given them 67 pages of it. At 10:15 p.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number, but Seattle area code. Mr. Chun, a professional but urgent woman's voice. This is Amanda Reeves from King County News. I understand you met with the Department of Labor today. Would you be willing to provide a statement? How did you get this number? A source, Mr. Chun. Shin Logic has issued a company-wide email alleging that you are mentally unstable and making false allegations. This is your chance to respond. No comment, I said. Mr. Chun, Sarah Chun is attacking your credibility publicly. You don't want to defend yourself. The facts will defend themselves, I said, and hung up. But she was right. Sarah had gone on the offensive, and I was sitting in a hotel room eating leftover Thai food, letting her control the narrative. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a press release, not a public defense, but a document I should have written weeks ago, a timeline. Every decision, every meeting, every email, every moment where I chose to stay silent instead of speaking up, every compromise that led to the next compromise. Every time I told myself it was temporary, that we'd fix it later, that everyone else was doing it. So why shouldn't we? I wrote for 3 hours, and when I was done, I had a 20-page document that was part confession, part testimony, part explanation. I titled it How We Built a Unicorn on Lies, a personal account. Then I saved it and closed the laptop because I wasn't sure what to do with it yet. Releasing it would be satisfying. It would be my truth against Sarah's narrative, but it would also be self-aggrandizing. It would make me the hero of my own story, the brave whistleblower, when really I was just the guy who had finally gotten uncomfortable enough to stop being complicit. I needed to think about it. At 11:47 p.m., my phone vibrated with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Chun, this is Marcus Williams. I also testified before the DOL today. So did 6 other former employees. Thank you for making it possible for us to tell our stories. We stand with you. I stared at that message for a long time. 7 people who had lost their jobs for doing the right thing, who had been silenced and discredited, who had been living with the knowledge that they had been punished for having integrity. And I had been the one who still had a salary, still had a title, still had access to the systems and the information. I had been the one who could have stopped it years ago and hadn't. Thank you for your courage. I texted back. I should have done this sooner. You did it when you could, he replied. That's what matters. But it didn't feel like what mattered. What mattered was that I had let it go on for years, that I had benefited from the violations while other people suffered for opposing them. At 1:23 a.m., another text message. This one from Sarah. I know you were at the house. I found your note. I didn't respond. You told me yesterday this wasn't about revenge, but you are destroying me, Derek. You are destroying everything I am. Still didn't respond. I am pregnant with your child, and you are trying to send me to prison. What kind of person does that? I typed the kind of person who spent 6 hours testifying about crimes I helped commit. I implicated myself too, Sarah. This isn't about destroying you. It's about telling the truth. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She was typing, deleting, typing, trying to find the right words to make me back down. The truth is you're bitter about the affair, and you're using the company to hurt me. The truth is we broke federal law repeatedly and deliberately. The affair just made me stop pretending we hadn't. I can't go to prison. I'm having a baby. Then you should have thought about that before you build a company on violations. You helped build it. I know. That's why I'm cooperating with the investigation. I'm not claiming to be innocent. I'm claiming to be done. Long pause. Then what do you want? Just tell me what you want and I'll give it to you. Money, the house, your name cleared publicly. Just tell me what it takes to make you stop. I read that message 3 times, feeling something cold settle in my chest. She still thought this was a negotiation. She still thought everything had a price. I want you to fix the company, I typed. Come into full compliance. Reclassify the workers. Install proper environmental controls. Restate the financials. Make it right, even if it costs you your valuation. That's impossible. The board will never approve it. The investors will sue. Then I guess you'll have to choose between your company and your freedom. That's not fair. Neither was asking me to approve an open marriage while you were pregnant with my child. Life isn't fair, Sarah. Consequences are just real. I turned my phone off. After that, I sat in the dark hotel room, listening to the sound of cars on the street below, the occasional siren, the ambient noise of a city that never fully slept. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and turned on the TV news. They were running the same loop. Chinloric stock suspended. CEO under scrutiny. Investigation pending. At 5:30 a.m., my phone started buzzing even though it was off. I turned it on to find 17 new messages, all from the last hour. The Seattle Times had published a breaking news story. Federal investigators expand ChinLogic probe. Multiple whistleblowers detail systematic violations. The article quoted sources familiar with the investigation and detailed the testimony of multiple former employees. It mentioned me by name as a senior executive who came forward voluntarily with documentation. It also included Sarah's email about my mental health crisis, followed by a statement from the DOL spokesperson. We evaluate evidence, not narratives. Our investigation is based on documentary proof and corroborated testimony from multiple sources. That was the headline that would kill Sarah's strategy. The feds had essentially called her a liar on the record. By 7 a.m., it was the lead story on every local news site. By 8 a.m., it had hit the national business news. Bloomberg, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal, they all picked it up. ChinLogic whistleblower details culture of compliance violations. Former executives' testimony triggers federal criminal probe. Unicorn startup faces potential criminal charges for labor and environmental violations. The story had mass now, its own gravity. It was pulling in journalists, analysts, and regulatory agencies. The SEC formally announced its investigation at 9:15 a.m. The EPA issued a statement at 9:47 saying they were reviewing the allegations of environmental compliance violations. By 10 a.m., Chunlogic's valuation had unofficially dropped by 60%. The investors were fleeing. The Goldman Sachs board representative had formally called for Sarah's resignation. I watched this all unfold from my hotel room. Eating a breakfast sandwich from the convenience store across the street, feeling strangely detached from the destruction. This was what accountability looked like at scale. Not personal, not emotional, just the systematic dismantling of something that had been built on faulty foundations. At 11:23 a.m., David called. "You need to see this," he said. "See what?" "Turn on King County News. Sarah is holding a press conference." I found the channel. There she was standing in front of the Chunlogic building. Microphones everywhere, cameras pointed at her face. She looked terrible, exhausted, pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but she was immaculately dressed, power suit, perfect hair, the armor of professional competence. "I want to directly address the allegations that have been made about Chunlogic," she began, her voice steady. "My husband Derek Shun is a man I love, a man I have built a life and a company with. He is also a man who is struggling with serious mental health issues related to our separation." There it was again, the mental health narrative. The allegations he has made are based on misunderstandings and misinterpretations of normal business practices. "We have always operated within legal guidelines, and we will cooperate fully with any investigation to prove that." A reporter shouted a question. "Ms. Chun, the Department of Labor says they have documentary evidence from multiple sources. Are they all misunderstanding?" "I believe they have taken ordinary business communications out of context," Sarah said smoothly. "When you are building a fast-growing company, you are constantly balancing compliance with innovation." "Of context," Sarah said smoothly. "When you are building a fast-growing company, you are constantly balancing compliance with innovation. Sometimes that balance is mischaracterized by people who don't understand the full picture." Another reporter. "Your husband alleges that you retaliated against employees who raised compliance concerns. How do you respond?" "That is absolutely false. We have always encouraged employees to raise concerns through the proper channels. If individuals felt they were unfairly terminated, that's unfortunate. But it was never because they raised compliance issues." She was good, calm, measured, reasonable. To someone who didn't know the facts, she sounded believable. But I knew the facts, and so did the Department of Labor. "Ms. Chun," another reporter called out. "Sources say you sent a company-wide email calling your husband mentally unstable. Isn't that defamatory?" For just a second, Sarah's composure cracked. Just a flicker of something. "Anger, maybe, or fear. I sent an email expressing concern for my husband's well-being," she said carefully. "That is not defamation. It is honesty about a difficult personal situation. But you also called his allegations baseless because they are baseless. And when this investigation concludes, that will be proven." She took 2 more questions. Both softballs. Then her lawyer stepped in and ended the press conference. I turned off the TV. "She's going down fighting," David said on the phone. "Yes," I agreed. "She will." "Will it work?" "No," I said, "because I have the emails, I have the meeting minutes, I have 7 other witnesses. She can spin whatever narrative she wants, but the evidence doesn't care about her story." "What are you going to do?" I looked at my laptop, at the 20-page document I had written last night. "I'm going to tell my story," I said. "Not to the press, not to fight Sarah, just to document what happened from my perspective, so there's a record." "When?" "After the investigations conclude, after the legal stuff is settled, when it can't be used to hurt anyone, except maybe me." "That's very noble," David said. "Also very stupid. She's attacking you publicly. Let her. The truth will come out eventually. I don't need to win the PR battle. I just need to sleep at night." We hung up and I sat there in my anonymous hotel room watching the news cycle, watching my old life disintegrate in real time. And somewhere in Seattle, Sarah was probably back in her office, probably surrounded by lawyers and PR consultants, probably plotting her next move. And somewhere else, in federal offices, investigators were building a case that would change our lives forever. The truth was in motion, now there was no stopping it. The board meeting happened on Friday morning. I wasn't there, obviously, but David sent me updates every 20 minutes like he was live tweeting a corporate execution. 9:03 a.m. They're all here. Sarah, Richard, the Goldman rep, outside legal counsel. They all look like they're at a funeral. 9:47 a.m. Goldman has just formally withdrawn their support. They've recommended the CEO's immediate suspension pending the investigation. 10:15 a.m. Sarah is fighting back. Says she won't step down. Says the company will collapse without her. 10:38 a.m. Richard, just read your email to the entire board. The one about cooperating with the DOL. Sarah's face went white. 11:02 a.m. They're taking a vote. Sarah's not in the room. 11:19 a.m. 6-1 vote to suspend Sarah as CEO effective immediately. The one no vote was Marcus Reed, the guy she hired last year. 11:23 a.m. Sarah just walked out. Didn't say a word. Didn't take anything from her office. Just walked out. I read that last message 3 times, sitting in my hotel room with cold coffee and the remains of another convenience store breakfast. Sarah had built ChumLogic from nothing. 15 years of her life, her identity, her purpose, her proof that she was exceptional, and the board had taken it away from her in 11 minutes. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated, satisfied that justice had been done. Instead, I just felt empty. My phone rang at 11:47. Richard Joyagwai. I let it ring twice before answering. Richard, Derek, thanks for taking my call. He sounded exhausted. I wanted you to hear this directly from me. The board has voted to suspend Sarah effective immediately. We're bringing in an interim CEO, Catherine Walls, from the board's operations committee to oversee compliance remediation. Okay, I said. We are also accepting your documentation as accurate and beginning a full internal audit. We will reclassify workers, install proper environmental controls, and restate financials. Everything you recommended in your email, that's going to tank your valuation. I know. We're projecting a 70% reduction. Maybe more, he sighed. But it's better than criminal prosecution for the entire board. You're doing the right thing. I said, I'm doing the necessary thing. There's a difference. He paused. Derek, I need to ask you something. Sarah's lawyers are pushing the mental health narrative hard. They're going to subpoena your medical records, claim you had a breakdown, try to discredit your testimony. Let them try. I don't have a history of mental health issues. No hospitalizations, no medication, no diagnosis of anything except being married to someone who lied to me. They're going to go after your motive too. Say this was about revenge for the affair. The DOL has the testimony of 7 other former employees. Are they all having affairs with Sarah too? He laughed a short, bitter laugh. No, I guess not. Another pause. For the record, I believe you. I always believed you were the one holding things together while Sarah focused on growth at all costs. You could have said something. I could have. He agreed, but I didn't, which makes me complicit too. We were quiet for a moment. 2 men who had chosen ambition over integrity and were now facing the consequences. What happens to Sarah now? I asked. Legally, she's facing potential criminal charges. The U.S. Attorney's Office is reviewing the case. If they prosecute, she could face up to 5 years just on the environmental violations, plus fines, plus civil penalties. He cleared his throat. Personally, I don't know. She's not returning calls. Her lawyer says she's taking some time to focus on her health. Her health. The baby, she told me she's pregnant. I know. She told the board. Used it as an argument for why she shouldn't be suspended. His voice grew cautious. Is it yours? She says 6 weeks, which would make it mine. Before Singapore, before Marcus Oldry. Are you going to contest paternity? I looked out the window at the gray Seattle sky, at the rain that had started again, at the city where I had built a life that no longer existed. No, I said. If she's really pregnant, and if it's mine, then I'm going to be a father. I'm not going to punish a child for its mother's choices. That's very decent of you. Decency has nothing to do with it. It's just reality. We talked for a few more minutes about logistics, transition plans, my final paycheck, the company laptop I still had, professional things, easy things, things that didn't require us to acknowledge that we had all been part of something that had gone very wrong. After I hung up, I sat for a long time trying to process what had just happened. Sarah was suspended. The company was in crisis. The investigations were expanding, and I was going to be a father. That last part kept coming back, demanding attention. A father. I had always wanted kids in that abstract way people want things they assume will happen eventually. Sarah had always said later, after the Series B, after the IPO, after the company stabilized, there was always a milestone we had to hit first. It turned out later was now, under the worst possible circumstances. At 2:37 p.m., my phone vibrated with an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. Patterson and Rhodes, specialists in family law. Mr. Chun, we represent Sarah Chun in matters related to her pregnancy and your impending separation. Ms. Chun wishes to establish a co-parenting framework that protects both the interests of the child and the privacy of both parties. We propose a meeting next week to discuss custody arrangements, financial support, and communication protocols. Please retain counsel and have them contact us to schedule. Sincerely, Margaret Patterson, attorney at law. So it was real. Sarah was really pregnant, and her lawyers were already positioning for the custody battle. I forwarded the email to a family law attorney David had recommended, a woman named Rachel Kim, who apparently specialized in high-conflict divorces with significant assets. That was my marriage. Now, high conflict. Significant assets. At 4:15 p.m., I got a call from a number with a D.C. area code. Mr. Chun, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney James Morrison. I'm in the criminal division. Do you have a few minutes? My stomach sank. Yes. I've reviewed your testimony with the Department of Labor, and I've been assigned to evaluate potential criminal prosecution related to Chenlock's violations. I want to be clear with you about something. You are currently a cooperating witness, but you are also a potential defendant. What happens next depends in large part on your continued cooperation. If you are willing to testify in any criminal proceedings, if you are willing to provide additional documentation, if you are willing to help us build a case against the primary decision-makers, then we would be willing to recommend immunity or significantly reduce charges. And if I'm not willing, then you will be prosecuted along with everyone else. His tone was matter-of-fact. Mr. Chun, I'm not trying to threaten you. I'm trying to be honest about your options. You participated in these violations, you benefited from them, but you also stopped them by coming forward. That matters. What do you need from me? Full cooperation and complete honesty and testimony if it goes to trial against Sarah, against anyone involved in criminal conduct, including yourself if that's what the truth requires. I close my eyes. I'll cooperate good. We will be in touch to schedule a formal proffer session. In the meantime, do not discuss your testimony with anyone except your attorney. And Mr. Chun, get an attorney. Hey, good one. This is serious. He hung up, and I sat there feeling the weight of what I had just agreed to. I was going to testify against Sarah, against the woman I loved, against the mother of my child, and I was going to do it under oath in a courtroom with everything on the record, recorded and permanent. At 6:42 p.m., my phone rang. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I answered. Derek, her voice was barely a whisper, broken. Can we talk, please? We're talking now. I mean in person, face to face, no lawyers, no recordings, just us. Every instinct told me this was a trap, that Sarah was trying to get me to say something she could use, that her lawyer had probably told her to make this call. But there was something in her voice that sounded genuine, something that sounded like the Sarah I had fallen in love with, not the CEO who tried to discredit me publicly. Where? I asked. There's a coffee shop on Capitol Hill. Antelope Coffee, do you remember? I remembered. We had gone there on our first date 14 years ago, before the company, before the money, before everything got complicated. When? Now, or whenever you can. Derek, I just need to talk to you. Really talk, not through lawyers or emails, or I need to see you. Okay, I said. Give me 30 minutes. I took an Uber to Capitol Hill, watching the city slide into the evening gloom. The rain had turned to mist. That in-between state where you couldn't tell if it was raining or if the air had just given up and decided to be water. Antelope Coffee looked exactly the same. Same industrial aesthetic, same exposed brick, same smell of espresso and old books. It was like stepping into a time capsule of our relationship before it all went wrong. Sarah was already there, sitting in the back corner, the same table we had sat at 14 years ago. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual power suits. She looked like the grad school Sarah, the one who laughed at 2 a.m. over spreadsheets. I sat down across from her. Thank you for coming, she said. Your lawyer emailed me about custody arrangements. I know. I told her to. She wrapped her hands around a coffee cup that was probably empty. But that's not why I asked you to come. Why did you ask me to come? She looked up at me, and her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. I want to apologize. Really apologize, not the lawyer version where I express regret without admitting fault. I want to say I'm sorry for what I did to you, what we did to us. I didn't say anything, just waited. I was so focused on proving I was special, on building something that mattered, that I forgot that the person who was building it with me actually mattered too. Her voice broke. You weren't infrastructure, Derek. You were my partner, and I treated you like you were disposable. Yes, I said quietly. You did. The affair stopped. It started again. Marcus was a symptom, not the cause. I was running from the fact that I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone who cared more about valuation than values, who cared more about winning than doing things the right way. You built a multi-million-dollar company on violations that hurt people. I know. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face. I know. And you tried to tell me. You pushed back in meetings, you questioned decisions, and I steamrolled you every time, because I was so sure I was right. Why are you telling me this now? Because today I lost everything. The company, the board's trust, probably my freedom. And the only thing I care about is that I lost you. She reached a hand across the table, as if to take mine. Then she stopped. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to come back. I just needed you to know that you were right about everything. I looked at her, this woman I had loved for 12 years, who had been brilliant and ambitious and ultimately willing to sacrifice anything, including me, for success. I'm going to testify against you, I said. The U.S. attorney called me today. They're offering me immunity if I cooperate fully, which means testifying in court under oath about every violation we committed. She nodded slowly. I know. My lawyer told me that would probably happen. And you still wanted to see me. I wanted to see you because you're the father of my child. Because we are going to be connected for the rest of our lives, whether we want to be or not. And because I needed you to hear me say I'm sorry before everything gets even worse. Are you really pregnant? I asked. Or was that manipulation too? She took out her phone, opened a photo, and slid it across the table. An ultrasound image, a tiny blob with a flicker that might have been a heartbeat. 6 weeks and 2 days, she said. Due at the end of June. I have an OB appointment next week, if you want to come. I stared at the picture. Our child, a person who did not ask to be born into this mess. I'll go, I said, thank you. We sat there in the coffee shop where we had started, surrounded by the ghost of who we used to be, and I realized something. I didn't hate her. I should have. She had betrayed me, lied to me, tried to discredit me publicly. She had built a company on violations that hurt people, and she had been willing to let me take the fall if it came to that. But I didn't hate her. I just felt sad for what we had been, for what we had become, for the child who was going to grow up with parents who had destroyed each other. I hope you get help, I said finally. Therapy, maybe someone to talk to about why you needed to be exceptional so badly that you were willing to break laws and hurt people. I already started, she said. Court-ordered technically, but I'm actually going good, Derek. She looked at me with something like hope. After all this is over, after the trials, after the legal stuff, do you think we could try to be friends? For the baby's sake. I thought about that, about seeing her at school plays and birthday parties and graduations, about coordinating custody schedules and making decisions together about our child's life. Maybe, I said, but first you need to fix what you broke. Cooperate with the investigations, take responsibility, stop fighting, and start accepting the consequences. My lawyer says that's suicide. Your lawyer is trying to keep you out of prison. I'm trying to help you keep your soul. She smiled a sad, small smile. When did you get so wise? When I stopped being complicit, I said. I left her there in the coffee shop, sitting at our table, probably thinking about everything she had lost. And I walked out into the Seattle mist, back to my anonymous hotel, carrying the knowledge that I was going to be a father and that the woman I loved was probably going to prison. The truth was in motion, and there was no stopping it now. The OB appointment was on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. I got there 15 minutes early and sat in my car in the medical center parking lot trying to brace myself to see Sarah again. It had been 4 days since the coffee shop, 4 days since the board suspended her, 4 days since I agreed to testify against her in criminal proceedings, 4 days of my phone exploding with calls from journalists, lawyers, former colleagues, and random people who felt compelled to tell me I was either a hero or a monster, depending on their perspective. I had stopped reading the comments on news articles about Chin Loyat. Half called me a brave whistleblower. Half called me a vengeful Esmerito, destroying a successful woman out of spite. The truth, as usual, was more complicated than either narrative allowed. Sarah's car pulled into the lot at 2:53. I watched her get out, watched her smooth her jacket, watched her take a breath before walking towards the building. She looked better than she had in the coffee shop, more composed, like she had spent the weekend remembering how to be Sarah Chun, even if she wasn't CEO anymore. I got out and met her at the entrance. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Two people who had been married for 12 years, suddenly unable to figure out how to stand next to each other. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. "He's my son too." We checked in at the front desk. Sarah Chun and Derek Chin still using the same last name. Still technically married. Still pretending we knew how to do this. The waiting room was full of couples, happy couples mostly, holding hands and looking at baby magazines and radiating that glow of anticipated parenthood. We sat at opposite ends of a couch, careful not to touch, and I wondered what the other couples thought we were. First-time parents, nervous, marriage on the rocks, divorced co-parents trying to be civil. All of the above, probably. Sarah Chin, a nurse, called from the doorway. We stood up together and followed her back to an exam room that smelled antiseptic and had motivational posters about prenatal nutrition. "Dr. Morrison will be with you shortly," the nurse said. "Sarah, if you want to get into the gown, it opens in the front." She left and Sarah and I looked at each other. "I'll step out," I said. "You don't have to. We were married. It's not like you haven't seen." "I'll step out," I repeated, and I did. I stood in the hallway looking at posters about developmental milestones and warning signs of preeclampsia and tried to process the surreal reality that I was about to become a father with a woman who might be going to prison. The nurse came back out. "You can come back in." Sarah was sitting on the exam table in the gown, looking small and vulnerable. Dr. Morrison was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. "So," she said, looking at her tablet, "this is your first prenatal visit and you're measuring 6 weeks and 4 days. How are you feeling?" "Morning sickness," Sarah said. "Tired?" "Emotional, all very normal." "And you?" She looked at me, the father. "Yes," I said. "Wonderful. Let's have a look." "Okay." She wheeled over the ultrasound machine, and Sarah lay back on the table, and I stood there trying to figure out where to stand, where to look, how to be present without being intrusive. Sarah reached out a hand, not asking, just extending it. I took it. Dr. Morrison applied gel to Sarah's abdomen and moved the transducer. And suddenly, there it was on the screen, a tiny blob with a flickering heartbeat. "There's your baby," Dr. Morrison said. "The heartbeat looks good, strong and steady at 142 beats per minute. Our baby. The product of a weekend in Victoria, back when things had still been okay between us, or at least okay enough that we could pretend. Everything looks normal," Dr. Morrison continued. "The due date looks like June 28th. Do you have any questions? Is it safe for me to fly?" Sarah asked. "I might need to travel for legal proceedings." Morrison looked between us, clearly picking up on the tension. "Flying in the first trimester is generally fine. But given your stress levels, and I can tell you're under significant stress, I would recommend staying on the ground if possible. Stress is not good for the pregnancy." "I'll try," Sarah said quietly. We walked out of the office with a printout of the ultrasound and a folder full of prenatal information and stood in the parking lot not knowing how to say goodbye. "That was surreal," Sarah said finally. "Yes, Derek, I know things are complicated. I know we're on opposite sides of a legal battle, but can we try to keep the baby stuff separate? Can we try to be actual co-parents instead of just adversaries who happen to share DNA with the same child?" I looked at her, this woman who had betrayed me and lied to me and tried to destroy my credibility and who was also carrying my child. "I'll try," I said. "But Sarah, you need to understand something. I am going to testify truthfully about what we did at ChunLogic. I am not going to lie or downplay or protect you. That's non-negotiable. I know, but the baby, that's separate. We'll figure out custody, co-parenting, all of it. I will not use the legal stuff to hurt our child." She nodded, and for a moment I saw relief cross her face. "Thank you. Send me the date for the next appointment. I'll be there." I drove back to my hotel. I had leased a furnished apartment starting next week, something more permanent than hotel rooms, and tried to process what had just happened. I was going to be a father. In 7 months, there would be a person in the world who was half me, half Sarah, completely innocent of everything we had done to each other. That thought was both terrifying and miraculous in equal measure. At 5:47 p.m., David called. "You need to see the news," he said. "Tom, just turn it on." I found a local news channel on my laptop. They were running a special report. Chin Logic whistleblower, hero or villain. Great. The segment featured interviews with former employees, industry analysts, and a business ethics professor from the University of Washington. It was surprisingly balanced. Some people praised me for coming forward, some questioned my motives. Several pointed out that I had participated in the violations for years before reporting them. But then they cut to an interview with Marcus Williams, the warehouse supervisor. Derek Shun gave us our voice back. He said, looking directly into the camera. There were 20 of us who tried to stop what was happening. We all lost our jobs. We were all labeled as troublemakers, and then we watched the company keep growing, keep getting celebrated, while we couldn't even get good references. Derek finally did what we couldn't. He had the access, the documentation, and the courage to bring it all down. The segment ended with the anchor asking, the question remains, is Derek Shun a whistleblower who exposed wrongdoing or a disgruntled employee seeking revenge? The courts will ultimately decide. I turned off the laptop. My phone rang immediately. Rachel Kim, my family law attorney. I saw the interview. She said, that was good for your public image, but we need to talk about how this affects the custody negotiations. How? Sarah's team will argue that the media attention makes you unstable, that you're seeking public validation for your decisions instead of handling things privately. They'll paint you as someone who prioritizes being seen as right over what's best for the child. That's ridiculous. That's family court. Derek, I need you to stop doing interviews. Stop making statements. Stop interacting with the media at all. Everything you say can and will be used in the custody proceedings. I haven't done any interviews. Good. Keep it that way, and we need to schedule a meeting to discuss your custody proposal. Sarah's team sent over their initial framework, and it's aggressive. How aggressive? Primary physical custody for Sarah. You get supervised visits initially, expanding to every other weekend after 6 months if you demonstrate stability. She's claiming that your current living situation, hotel rooms, no permanent address, shows a lack of stability and readiness for parenthood. I felt anger rise in my chest. I don't have a permanent address because I left the house we shared because she was planning to sleep with other people while married to me. I know, and we will argue that. But Derek, we need to show the court that you are prepared for this. Sign the apartment lease. Set up a nursery. Take parenting classes. Show them you are serious about being a father. Not just serious about winning against Sarah. I am serious. Then prove it. Document everything. Be the model co-parent. Even when Sarah isn't, always take the high road. We talked for another 20 minutes about strategy, about what the court would want to see, about how to navigate being a cooperating federal witness, while also fighting for custody of my unborn child. After I hung up, I sat in my hotel room and made a list. Finalize apartment lease. Buy nursery furniture. Research parenting classes. Open separate bank account for child support. Document every interaction with Sarah. Stay off social media. Decline all media requests. Focus on being a good father, not on being right. It was pragmatic, strategic, the kind of operational planning I was good at, but it felt wrong somehow, as if I were treating my child like a project to be managed instead of a person to love. At 8:23 p.m., I got an email from Assistant U.S. Attorney James Morrison. Mr. Chun, we are scheduling your formal proffer session for next Thursday at 10 a.m. Please bring your attorney. We will go over your testimony in detail and discuss the scope of your cooperation. I should inform you that we are also in discussions with Sarah Chin's legal team about a possible plea agreement. If she cooperates fully and pleads guilty to specific charges, we may recommend a reduced sentence. This does not change your obligation to testify truthfully, but I wanted you to be aware that the case may not go to trial. Regards, James Morrison. Sarah might take a deal, which meant she might avoid the public spectacle of a trial, which meant she might get reduced charges, which meant my testimony might not destroy her in the way I was afraid it would. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Part of me wanted her to face the full consequences. Part of me wanted her to avoid prison so our child would have both parents present. Part of me was just tired of all of it. I called my criminal defense attorney. I had hired one on Morrison's advice and left a voicemail about the proffer session. Then I opened my laptop and did something I had been avoiding. I looked at my finances. The joint accounts would need to be separated. The house would need to be sold, or one of us would need to buy the other out. The retirement account split, the assets divided, the mechanics of divorce, on top of everything else. I opened a spreadsheet because I was still fundamentally an operations guy who processed emotion through organizational systems and started documenting our shared assets. The house valued at about 2.3, with 800,000 left on the mortgage. Savings, 400,000 in joint accounts. Retirement. My 401k had 850,000. Her stock options had been worth 15 million before the scandal. They were probably worth 3 million now. We had built a life together, a comfortable, successful life, and now we were dismantling it line by line on a spreadsheet. At 11:47 p.m., Sarah texted. I saw the news segment. Thank you for not doing interviews, for not making this a circus. You're welcome. My lawyer sent custody proposals. They're harsh. I'm sorry. She's just trying to protect me. I know. My lawyer says that's standard. Long pause. Then I'm scared. Derek. About the legal stuff, about the baby, about everything. And I don't know how to do this. I stared at that message for a long time. Sarah Chun admitting she didn't know how to do something. Sarah Chun, scared and vulnerable. No one knows how to do this. I typed back. We just figure it out as we go. I wish we were figuring it out together as partners, not adversaries. Me too. But we can't go back. We can only go forward. I know. Get some sleep. The stress isn't good for the baby. You sound like Dr. Morrison. Dr. Morrison is right. I turned off my phone and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the ultrasound picture. That tiny flickering heartbeat. That little life that would arrive in 7 months. Innocent and imperfect and completely dependent on two people who had destroyed each other. I had to be better than I had been. I had to be more than just the guy who documented violations and testified against his wife. I had to be a father, and I had no idea how to do that. But I would figure it out one day at a time, one choice at a time, starting with the choice to keep showing up even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. The furnished apartment was in Fremont, on the 3rd floor of a building overlooking the canal. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was barely functional, and windows that let in the watery Seattle light. It wasn't a home, but it was mine. I signed the lease on Wednesday and spent Thursday moving in the few possessions I had accumulated since leaving the house. 2 suitcases of clothes, a laptop, the ultrasound picture they'd framed, because that felt like something a father would do. The apartment came with furniture, a couch that had seen better days, a bed that was serviceable, a dining table with 2 chairs, but it didn't have any of the things that make a place feel lived in. No books on shelves, no pictures on walls, no accumulated detritus of a life in progress. I stood in the empty living room at 6 p.m. on Thursday night and realized I was going to need to build a nursery in here, a space for my son somewhere. This tiny person could sleep when he stayed with me, assuming the court gave me that right. I took out my phone and started searching for cribs. It felt absurd. Shopping for baby furniture while I prepared to testify about corporate fraud, planning custody arrangements while facing potential criminal charges. Trying to figure out how to be a father while everything else in my life disintegrated. But maybe that's what adulthood was, holding multiple contradictory realities at once and somehow not breaking. The proffer session was scheduled for 10 a.m. The next morning, my lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Thomas Brennan, who had been defending white-collar criminals for 20 years, had spent 3 hours prepping me on Wednesday. Tell the truth, he had said. That's it. That's the only rule. Don't downplay. Don't exaggerate. Don't try to protect anyone, including yourself. Morrison wants to know exactly what happened. Who made what decisions, and who knew what and when. What if they ask about Sarah specifically? Then you tell them about Sarah specifically. Derek, I know she's the mother of your child. I know you probably still have feelings for her. But if you lie or shade the truth to protect her, you will lose your immunity deal and you will end up facing charges alongside her. So I spent Wednesday night going over my documentation again, refreshing my memory on dates and decisions, and who had said what in which meeting, preparing to spend however many hours it took to lay out the full truth about how we had built a multi-million-dollar company on violations. At 9:47 a.m. on Friday, I sat in a conference room at the U.S. Attorney's Office with Thomas by my side, across from James Morrison and 2 other lawyers whose names I had already forgotten. Morrison was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of quiet intensity that came from believing in what he did. He opened a folder that was even thicker than the one Jennifer Kohler had brought to our first meeting. Mr. Chun, thank you for coming in. Before we begin, I want to make sure you understand the terms of the immunity agreement we are discussing. He slid a document across the table. Thomas picked it up and started reading. In exchange for your full and truthful cooperation, Morrison continued, we are prepared to recommend immunity from prosecution for all violations you participated in prior to November 15, 2024, the date you sent your documentation to the Chin Logic Board. This includes labor violations, environmental fraud, and securities issues. And after November 15th? Thomas asked. After that date, Mr. Chin's actions were to expose the violations, not to commit them. So there's nothing to pursue. And if he testifies at trial, if this goes to trial, yes, you will be called as a witness. But Mrs. Chin's attorneys are currently negotiating a plea agreement. She would plead guilty to specific charges in exchange for reduced sentencing recommendations. I felt something tighten in my chest. What kind of sentence? That is still being negotiated, but likely 2 to 3 years, possibly with early release for good behavior as opposed to the 15 to 20 she would face if we went to trial on all charges. 2 to 3 years, Sarah would miss our child's entire early childhood. First words, first steps, potty training. It would all happen while she was in a federal prison. When is the baby due? Morrison asked as if he had read my mind. End of June. If Mrs. Chun pleads guilty and sentencing happens on the usual timeline, she would likely report to prison in April or May before the birth. Can't the sentencing be delayed until after? That would be up to the judge, Morrison said, not unkindly. But in my experience, pregnancy does not usually result in sentencing delays. The Bureau of Prisons has facilities that handle pregnant inmates. I tried to imagine Sarah giving birth in prison. I tried to imagine our child being born in a federal facility, taking his first breath in a place designed for punishment. Let's begin, Thomas said quietly, putting a hand on my arm. The sooner we get through this, the sooner Derek can focus on preparing for fatherhood. So we began. Morrison walked me through everything. Every decision, every meeting, every email. He asked me to explain the context for specific violations, why we had made certain choices, who had objected, who had pushed through. The Portland facility wastewater situation, he said, opening an email on his laptop. This message from Sarah Chun to you dated March 15, 2024. I had memorized that email. The environmental compliance costs are unacceptable. Find a way to reduce them by at least 40%. I don't care how, just make it work. Sarah was focused on keeping operational costs down. I said, we were burning through cash faster than projected, and the investors were asking questions. The environmental compliance upgrade would have cost $800,000, which would have blown our quarterly numbers. What did you do? I found a consultant who specialized in what he called optimization strategies. He basically taught us how to rig the monitoring system. We'd run clean water through the meters during inspections and discharge the actual wastewater at night. Who approved this approach? Sarah did. I presented 3 options. Full compliance for $800,000, partial compliance for $400,000 with some risk, or the rigging strategy for $150,000 with significant risk. She chose the third option. Do you have documentation of that decision? Yes. Email dated March 22, 2024. I can pull it up. We have it. Morrison said. I just needed to confirm your recollection matches the documents. We went through case after case. The worker misclassification, the whistleblower retaliation, the creative revenue recognition that pushed the boundaries of securities law. Each time Morrison asked the same questions. What happened? Who decided? Who knew? Did anyone object? And each time I told them the truth. Yes, Sarah had made the final calls on most of the violations, but yes, I had implemented them. Yes, other executives had known and participated, but yes, some had objected and been overruled. The truth was complicated. It didn't fit into neat narratives of villains and victims. We had all participated, we had all known. Some of us had been more enthusiastic than others, but we had all been there. At 1:15 p.m., Morrison called for a lunch break. Thomas and I went to a sandwich shop around the corner and ate in silence for 10 minutes. You're doing well, Thomas said finally. Consistent, clear, not trying to downplay or exaggerate. I feel like I'm destroying her, I said. You're telling the truth about what she did. That's different. Is it? Yes, he took a bite of his sandwich. Derek, I've defended a lot of executives who got caught in situations like this. You know what most of them do? They lie. They blame subordinates. They claim ignorance. They try to rewrite history to make themselves look better. So what? And it never works? The truth always comes out. The only question is whether you'll be remembered as someone who lied about it or someone who took responsibility. He looked at me. Are you taking responsibility? That matters. We went back at 2 p.m. and continued for another 4 hours. By the time Morrison finally closed his folders at 6:08 p.m., I felt exhausted, hollowed out in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. Thank you, Mr. Chun, Morrison said. This has been very helpful. We will prepare the formal immunity agreement for your signature. In the meantime, do not discuss your testimony with anyone, except Mr. Brennan. What about Sarah? I asked. Am I allowed to talk to her about non-legal things? The baby, custody arrangements. You can talk about those things, but do not discuss the case. Do not discuss your testimony. Do not let her or her lawyers get information out of you about what you told us today. I nodded. One more thing, Morrison said. Mrs. Chin's attorneys have requested a meeting between the two of you, supervised by lawyers from both sides, to discuss a global settlement that would address both the criminal case and your divorce. A global settlement. Essentially, she would plead guilty to specific charges. You would agree to certain custody arrangements, and you would both agree not to file civil suits against each other. It's a way to resolve everything at once. Is that common? In cases like this, it can sometimes be cleaner than fighting multiple legal battles simultaneously. He paused. It's up to you. You're under no obligation to participate, but your lawyers seem to feel it's in everyone's best interest, especially the child's. I looked at Thomas, who shrugged. It's worth hearing what they're proposing. Doesn't mean you have to agree to anything. Okay, I said. I'll do the meeting. We scheduled it for the following week, and then I walked out of the U.S. Attorney's office into the early evening darkness. The city was alive with Friday night energy, people going to bars and restaurants, couples holding hands, the normal rhythm of lives that weren't falling apart. I drove to my new apartment in Fremont and sat in the empty living room with the lights off, watching car headlights sweep across the ceiling. My phone vibrated. How did it go? I stared at that message. Morrison had said not to discuss my testimony, but he hadn't said I couldn't acknowledge the meeting had happened. Long day. I'm tired. Morrison's office called mine. They said you were very thorough. I told the truth. That's all. Long pause. Then I know. My lawyer says that's what you do. That you're constitutionally incapable of lying, even when it would be easier. Is that a compliment or a criticism? Both. Maybe another pause. They proposed a global settlement meeting with both of our legal teams to resolve everything at once. I know. Morrison mentioned it. I agreed to the meeting. Thank you. I think it's the right thing for us, but mostly for the baby. When you tell the baby about all this I typed, when she's old enough to ask why mommy went to prison, I regretted sending it the moment I did. It was cruel, petty, the kind of thing you say when you're exhausted and angry and looking for someone to hurt because you're hurting. I'm sorry, I typed immediately. That was unfair. No, she wrote back. It was accurate. That's worse. I put my phone down and lay on the floor of my empty apartment, staring at the ceiling and thought about the ultrasound picture sitting on my kitchen counter in its new frame. That tiny heartbeat, that little life. In 7 months, there would be a person who needed me to be better than this. Better than the petty jabs, the exhaustion, and the anger. I needed to figure out how to be a father, how to be a co-parent with someone I had just spent 6 hours giving testimony against, how to build a life that wasn't defined by what I had lost. At 9:23 p.m., David called. I hear you survived the proffer session, he said. News travels fast. Shine Logic is a small world. Now everyone knows everything. He paused. How are you holding up? I don't know, I said honestly. I spent 6 hours detailing every illegal thing we did at the company. I have an unfurnished apartment. I'm shopping for cribs online. Sarah might go to prison before the baby is born. And I have no idea what I'm doing. Welcome to adulthood, David said. No one knows what they're doing. We're all just faking it and hoping it works out. That's not reassuring. It's not supposed to be reassuring. It's supposed to be honest. He paused. Derek, for the record, you did the right thing. The hard thing, but the right thing. And your kid is going to grow up knowing their dad had integrity, even when it cost him everything. What if integrity isn't enough? What if our kid grows up resenting me for sending their mom to prison? Then you deal with that when it happens. But Derek, you didn't send Sarah to prison. Sarah sent Sarah to prison by making choices that violated federal law. You just stopped pretending those choices didn't happen. We talked for a while longer about nothing important, just the comfort of connection with someone who had seen the whole story unfold. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and started looking at cribs again. White ones, mostly, simple and clean and gender-neutral, because we didn't know yet what we were having. I added one to my cart, then a changing table, then a rocking chair, building a nursery in an empty apartment for a child who didn't exist yet, who would be born into the wreckage of everything his parents had destroyed, but who would be loved fiercely, completely, in spite of everything else. That had to count for something. At 11:47 p.m., I placed the order. $800 for furniture I didn't know how to assemble for a child. I didn't know how to raise in an apartment. That didn't feel like a home. But it was a start, one choice at a time, one step forward, even when I didn't know where I was going. That was all anyone could do. The global settlement meeting was held in a neutral conference room at a downtown law firm on a Wednesday morning in early December. The first snow of the season was falling outside, rare for Seattle, the kind that made the whole city slow down and remember it didn't know how to handle winter. Inside there were 8 of us around a polished table. Sarah and her 2 attorneys, me and Thomas Brennan, Morrison from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Rachel Kim handling the family law, and a mediator whose job it was to keep us all from killing each other. Sarah looked different, smaller. Somehow the pregnancy was showing now, just a slight curve under her sweater that hadn't been there a month ago. Our child growing even as everything fell apart around her. "Thank you all for coming," the mediator said. She was a woman named Patricia Chun, no relation, who had apparently facilitated dozens of these complex negotiations. "We are here to discuss a comprehensive agreement that addresses both the criminal proceedings and the family law matters. Let's start with the criminal case." Morrison opened his folder. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is prepared to offer the following. Mrs. Chun pleads guilty to 2 counts of environmental regulation violations and 1 count of securities fraud. We recommend 28 months incarceration, followed by 2 years of supervised release and $500,000 in fines. 28 months, 2 years and 4 months. Our child would be 2 when Sarah got out." In exchange, Morrison continued, "Mrs. Chinko operates fully with the ongoing investigations, provides testimony against any other individuals if necessary, and agrees to a lifetime ban on serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company." Sarah's face was pale. Her lead attorney, a woman named Jennifer Walls, who cost $850 an hour, leaned over and whispered something. "My client accepts those terms," Walls said. Just like that. Sarah Chun, who had spent 15 years building a company, who had been on magazine covers and TED Talk stages, who had been worth tens of millions of dollars, agreed to go to prison and to never run another public company again. "When would she report?" I asked. "Sentencing would likely be in March," Morrison said. "She would report to a federal facility in April, about 6 to 8 weeks before the baby's due date." Sarah's hand went to her stomach. That unconscious protective gesture that first-time pregnant women make. "Which brings us to the custody agreement," Patricia said, looking at Rachel Kim. Rachel produced a document. "We propose the following. Joint legal custody with Derek, having primary physical custody for the first 28 months, while Sarah serves her sentence. Sarah would have visitation rights in accordance with Bureau of Prisons regulations, typically limited contact visits with the child. Following her release," Rachel continued, "we transition to a shared custody arrangement. Week on, week off, with both parents having equal time. All major decisions about the child's welfare, education, health care, religion require mutual agreement." "Child support," Walls asked. "Sarah would pay according to state guidelines, suspended during incarceration, but resuming upon release. Derek would maintain health insurance for the child." We went through the details for another hour. Who got what from the house? How to divide the assets? What happened to Sarah's remaining stock options? The mechanics of dismantling a 12-year marriage while also creating a framework to raise a child together. It was surreal, businesslike, as if we were negotiating a business deal instead of determining the future of our family. At 12:47 p.m., Patricia slid a document across the table. "If both parties agree to these terms, we can have the paperwork finalized by the end of the week." Sarah looked at me, really looked at me. The first direct eye contact we'd had since the meeting began. "Do you agree?" she asked quietly. I thought about everything that had led us here. The lies, the betrayals, the violations. The moment in her office when she offered me an open marriage as if it were a gift. The moment I clicked send on that email to the board, I thought about the ultrasound picture in my apartment. That tiny heartbeat that would become a person who needed us both to figure out how to be better than we had been. I agree, I said. Then we have a deal. Patricia said, we signed papers. A lot of papers. Sarah's hand was shaking as she signed her plea agreement. Mine was steady, which surprised me. I had expected to feel something, triumph maybe, or vindication, or at least relief. Instead, I just felt tired and sad for what we had had and lost. After the meeting, Sarah and I stood in the lobby while our lawyers talked about next steps and filing deadlines and court dates. The snow was falling harder now, blanketing the streets in white. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, for agreeing to primary custody, for not fighting me on visitation rights, for not using the baby as a weapon. I'm not doing it for you, I said. I'm doing it because our child deserves better than parents who destroy each other. She nodded. I'm starting therapy tomorrow. Real therapy, not the court-ordered check-the-box therapy. I want to understand why I made the choices I made. Why I was willing to risk everything, including you, for success. That's good. And I'm going to write our child a letter explaining everything. Why I made the choices I did. What happened. Why I'm in prison. So that when they're old enough to ask, they'll have it. The truth in my own words. I think that's the right thing to do. We stood in silence for a moment. Two people who had loved each other once, who were about to be parents together, who destroyed each other, and somehow had to figure out how to coexist. I'm sorry, she said finally, for everything. Not the, I'm sorry from a lawyer. Not the, I'm sorry strategic. I'm sorry real and genuinely for what I did to you, for what we did to ourselves. I know, I said. I'm sorry too for not stopping it sooner, for being complicit for so long, for letting it get so far before I finally said something. You did the right thing. So did you today, taking the deal, taking responsibility. It won't undo what happened, but it's a start. She smiled a sad, small smile. When did you get so wise? When I stopped being complicit, I said. I left her there in the coffee shop, sitting at our table, probably thinking about everything she had lost. And I walked out into the Seattle mist, back to my anonymous apartment in Fremont. The nursery furniture had arrived the week before. I had spent a whole Saturday putting it together. The crib with its clean white lines, the changing table with drawers for diapers and wipes, the rocking chair where I would probably spend countless nights soothing a crying baby. The room was ready. The apartment was ready. I was as ready as I could be. 3 months later, Sarah pleaded guilty in federal court on a gray March morning. I wasn't there. Thomas advised against it, but I watched the news coverage from my apartment. She stood before the judge in a simple blue dress, her pregnancy visible now at 5 months. And she said, "Guilty, Your Honor," 3 times, once for each count. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for mid-April. We had seen each other twice since the settlement meeting, once for another OB appointment, where we found out we were having a girl. Once for a birthing class that Sarah's therapist had suggested we take together, where we practiced breathing techniques and learned about the stages of labor and tried to pretend we were a normal couple preparing for a baby. We weren't normal. We would never be normal, but we were trying. The crib in my apartment had a mobile now. Little stars and moons that spun slowly, playing a soft lullaby. I had painted one wall a pale yellow, bought tiny clothes in newborn sizes, soft onesies and sleepers that looked impossibly small. I had read 3 parenting books, watched countless YouTube videos, joined a support group for single fathers trying to prepare for something you can never really prepare for. David came over one Saturday and helped me install a car seat. "You're really going to do this," he said, testing the straps. "I'm really going to do this. How do you feel?" Terrified, excited, like I'm about to jump off a cliff without a parachute. But also I looked at the car seat, this complicated piece of safety equipment that would hold my daughter like it's the most important thing I'll ever do. "You're going to be a good dad," David said. "How do you know?" "Because you care about getting it right. That's half the battle." Sarah's sentencing hearing was on April 18th. I went this time sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching as the judge heard arguments from both sides. Morrison laid out the violations, the scope of the damage, the need for accountability. Walls talked about Sarah's cooperation, her acceptance of responsibility, her pregnancy, her commitment to rehabilitation. Sarah stood when asked to address the court. She looked fragile, her belly round with our daughter, her voice steady. "Your Honor, I built a company I'm proud of, but I built it the wrong way. I cut corners, I violated regulations, I prioritized growth over compliance and success over integrity. She paused. I hurt people, employees who trusted me, investors who believed in me, my husband who supported me until he couldn't anymore, and I hurt the values I claimed to believe in. I am not asking for leniency because I am pregnant. I am asking for the chance to serve my sentence, to accept the consequences of my choices, and to eventually be the kind of mother my daughter deserves, the kind who values truth over winning. The judge sentenced her to 28 months, as recommended. She would report to FCI Dublin in California on May 15th, 3 weeks away, 5 weeks before our daughter's due date. June 27th. The labor started at 3:47 a.m. My phone rang and I knew before I answered what it was. Derek, Sarah's mother, whom I had barely spoken to in months, sounded panicked. Sarah's in labor. She's asking for you. I'm on my way. I drove to Swedish Hospital through empty pre-dawn streets, my heart pounding, trying to remember everything from the birthing class. Sarah was in a delivery room surrounded by monitors and nurses, and her mother was hovering anxiously. She looked up when I came in, and her face crumpled with relief. You came? Of course I came. I took her hand. How far apart are the contractions? 5 minutes. They say it could be a while yet. I stayed through the contractions and the breathing and the long hours of waiting. Her mother left around noon, and it was just us, Sarah and me, and the medical team, bringing our daughter into the world together. At 6:23 p.m., after 14 hours of labor, I watched my daughter take her first breath. She was perfect, tiny and red and wrinkled, and absolutely perfect. The nurse laid her on Sarah's chest, and Sarah started to cry. Tears of relief and exhaustion, and I stood there with my hand on her shoulder, looking at this tiny person we had made together. Hello, little one, Sarah whispered. I'm your mommy, and this is your daddy, and we love you so much. Emma Rose Chun, 7 pounds and 4 ounces. Perfect APGAR scores. A full head of dark hair, and her mother's nose and fingers that wrapped around mine with surprising strength. We were allowed to have an hour together, the 3 of us, before reality intruded. Sarah would stay for 2 days to recover. Then she would have 2 weeks at home before she had to report to prison. 2 weeks to hold her daughter before she said goodbye for 28 months. But for that hour in that hospital room, we were just a family, imperfect, broken, but real. She has your eyes, Sarah said, looking at Emma. She has your determination, I replied. Look how strong she's holding my finger, Derek. Sarah looked at me. Thank you for being here, for doing this with me, for being the kind of person who shows up even when it's hard. Always, I said for her, always. 2 weeks later, I stood in my apartment holding Emma, watching from the window as Sarah's car pulled away. Her mother was driving her to the airport, to California, to FCI Dublin, where she would spend the next 2 years. We had said our goodbyes an hour ago. Sarah had held Emma for a long time, crying quietly, memorizing her face. Then she had handed her to me and walked out before she broke down completely. Emma slept in my arms, warm and perfect, not knowing her mother was just gone, not knowing about prisons and plea deals and all the complicated adult things that had led to this moment. It's just you and me for a while, little one, I whispered. But we're going to be okay. My phone vibrated. A text message from Sarah. Boarding now. Kiss her for me. Tell her every day I love her. I'll call when I can. I will. Be safe. I looked at Emma, her tiny sleeping face, and thought about everything that had led to this. The violations, the betrayals, the moment I clicked send on that email, the investigations and the testimony and the settlement meetings. It had all been necessary. Painful, destructive, necessary, because sometimes the truth burns everything down. Sometimes accountability costs more than you think you can pay. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing everything you built. But sometimes in the ashes something new grows, something real, something worth protecting. I carried Emma to the nursery, to the crib I had assembled on the yellow walls I had painted. I laid her down gently, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath. And I made a promise to her, to myself, to the version of Sarah who would get out of prison in 2 years. I promised to tell the truth always, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promised to value integrity over success, people over profit, doing right over being right. I promised to teach Emma that consequences are real and that choices matter and that sometimes loving means holding people accountable instead of protecting them. And I promised to be here every day, every feeding and diaper change and sleepless night, to be the father she deserved. The snow had started falling again outside, soft and quiet, blanketing everything in white, fresh and clean and new, like starting over, like second chances, like the truth finally setting you free. Emma stirred in her crib, making soft baby noises, and I reached down to touch her hand. "Welcome to the world, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's complicated and messy, and sometimes it breaks your heart. But it's also beautiful, and we're going to figure it out together." Her fingers wrapped around mine, and for the first time in months, I felt something that wasn't exhaustion or anger or grief. I felt hope. The truth served as justice. Sarah served 23 months with good behavior, getting out in early 2027 to begin the long work of rebuilding her relationship with Emma and learning to be the mother she had promised to become. Derek raised Emma as a single father, documenting every milestone in letters he would give to Sarah when she was released. Logic was restructured, brought into full compliance, and survived. Smaller, humbler, but finally operating with integrity. And Emma grew